type team, and it was when they tried to branch out into these other styles, they didn't have that same level of success. So I'm really glad that they're still sticking to trying to get different styles into their repertoire, but the fact that they're finally getting some success with them can be huge.
Especially success against a team like Fnatic yesterday. Let's take a look at this draft. Celeste going to be the first man from Salty Potatoes. Do not want Hundo to get his hands on that one. It's going to be Catherine and Grace locked on in.
And with the Celeste ban, that actually also takes some of the priority off of the Blackfeather that we've seen focused by so many teams. Obviously, it's still a very strong pick, but the main reason Blackfeather was so heavily prioritized was because of its strength into things like the Celeste. Grace and Catherine going to be the two captains, kind of expected if they're not banned that they're going to be picked very
Salty
early.
Potatoes are going to have to be careful about the fact that G2 can still run Vox, Fortress, Grace. They did it. We saw the comp yesterday. G2 didn't quite do it with Grace, but we saw the comp, and they've ran it in the past with Lance. It's a very similar composition, works in the exact same way, actually. So Salty Potatoes have to be careful. They take away Glaive. I'm not quite sure why they would do that, because we haven't seen Glaive come out too much out of G2, especially in these last 2 seasons. Dark Potato hasn't been playing it too often, neither has been Hundor. Maybe perhaps they just don't want to go against that pick, and it could counter something that they're going for. G2 now, they have the options of either locking in a carry and trying to secure a power pick, or flexing something by picking up Fortress, and that way you can still flex the Grace and flex the Fortress going into multiple
Taking
roles.
the Fortress, I think, would be really risky, though, because Salty Potatoes could then just pick up the Vox and just deny that composition, and there's not a whole lot of things you would want to run with the Fortress. But the Idris is it's a risky pick here. Normally, I love Idris with Grace, but you're going into a Catherine who is known as the hardest counter into an Idris, so it's a risky pickup for the side of G2. Hopefully they'll be able to play it out. Obviously with the CP Idris, it's not as hard of a counter, but Catherine is still so strong.
Yeah, the Kestrel locking somewhat explains the Glaive ban that we saw coming out from Salty Potatoes earlier. Obviously Glaive does very well trying to lock down a Kestrel, so I'm curious to see how they're going to round this one out.
Yeah, I mean, Kestrel and Catherine is a pretty strong duo, just because you have a lot of CC control with the stuns coming out of Catherine with the Merciless Pursuit, and then Kestrel following up with her damage. We know the crit builds that she can go with the double monocles and the tornado triggers, and they pick up a Blackfeather with it. I'm assuming this is going to be a CP Blackfeather in the jungle, unless they want to run it in lane and put Kestrel in the jungle as CP.
Yeah.
I'm expecting it to be weapon power Kestrel with a CP Blackfeather jungle, and this composition has a lot of poke mid-game when Blackfeather gets to his level 8. It has very strong late-game team fighting control, just because there's a lot of diving, a lot of damage output potential, and a lot of CC coming from Catherine. So it's a pretty good overall composition. The only weakness that it has is its early game, especially with the CP Blackfeather. So if G2 decides to go for a really aggressive jungler, they can take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's really what G2 is going to have to do, because if you don't win the early game against this composition, Salty Potatoes, I love this composition just because it is strong in multiple different strategies. If you want to poke, you have Blackfeather and Kestrel, both great at poking, and Catherine receiving poke is really good, at being able to counter that out. And they can also dive pretty aggressively. The Krull, I think, is a smart pickup here into the Blackfeather. You can really dominate the jungle pretty early on with a Krull into the Blackfeather matchup, especially CP, because the CP Blackfeather does not have a good clear speed whatsoever, especially because they don't really build a Stormguard banner on a Blackfeather if you're going CP. So hopefully this Krull is going to be very aggressive, trying to get into the jungle constantly.
Yeah, I definitely like G2's composition better, just because they have the Cruel with CP Idris and a Grace, so they have strong early game ganking potential and aggressive play potential, but at the same time CP Idris and Grace scale so well and can end up being the carries they need to win the team fights later on. So I really like G2's composition into Salty Potatoes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these compositions are going to play out. Obviously, we kind of have one that's much more towards the late game, one that's going to be much more aggressive in the early game. But we saw yesterday what Truth could do on that weapon power Kestrel. If we see that come out and they do get to the late game, expect health bars to be obliterated. But we want you guys at home as well to get involved in this conversation and let us know who you want to be moving on into the finals later on today. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter to let us know who you are supporting coming on into this one. It's the grudge match, though, between G2 Esports and Salty Potatoes. So let's get on into this one and jump onto the Halcyon Fold.
Thank you very much, Munchables. A grudge match indeed. Both these teams were fighting to go to the Unified Western Live Championships back in summer. G2 was able to take that position from Salty Potatoes, so we'll have to see, Denomine, how Salty Potatoes react to that theft of a 6th place in the summer Vainglory 8.
Yeah, Salty Potatoes obviously did a good job fighting their way up from the Challenger battles and made it into the Vainglory 8. Maybe not with the success that they wanted, but they've made a couple changes and are looking to have a little bit more success this time around. Have to see how this Catherine does into the Idris, though. Mr. Dowsett here doesn't seem to think it's a good counter.
Right, okay, so when Idris was introduced to the Vainglory competitive meta, Idris was played primarily as a weapon power hero. But Catherine is really good into weapon power Idris, I'll admit it, you know, because Idris dives on in onto the back line and Catherine instantly stuns and Idris is kind of left there standing still. But this is CP Idris. He has so much range, he has so much kiting ability. Hundor very likely to build a Frostburn as his last item, which is going to give him even more kiting ability, plus the Shadow Glass for the massive amount of damage, just really going for max damage with his build. And I just don't see really how Catherine is going to counter Hundor. The only counter that I guess you can consider, and now I'm rambling the nominate, is that the Storm Guard bubble will hurt his teammates who are going to be on the front line. But if Hundor is clever, then it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely, and we know what a threat Hundor can be when he does get on this hero. And one paired up with Dark Potatoes Krull and Kiana Nakoa's Grace. That's a scary thing to think of, so there's definitely a point in this game where Sneaky and Esquire need to really abuse their mid-game power spike and try to prevent Hundor from getting to that 3rd and 4th item safely if they want to really have some success here. Because overall, as the game gets later and later, I think G2 has a significantly stronger draft.
Oh, I agree. G2's draft looking very scary. Really going to be Dark Potato to get them through this early game, but we see Salty Potatoes actually struggling to do anything to Hundor here, even when Krax is stacking up that Merciless Pursuit. 7 stacks at 2.5 minutes. Hundor's really just giving it to him for free, but despite the fact that CC's there, it's not really doing anything. Esquire in the jungle struggling. Dark Potato, he's looking for first blood, and Kiana Nakoa is rotating as well. This should be first blood to Dark Potato as he dives on in, smites him away, and that's going to be the kill going over. Now it's Krax in trouble. 1 HP! Maybe a little bit more than 1, but Hundor says, you know what, I might be able to get the kill. He can't, so it will be Krax escaping from G2.
Yeah, first blood, though, going on to Dark Potato. That's a pretty sizable burst of gold going onto a Krull's pocket, so that will help him get to that tanky point where it's going to help Hundor be that hyper carry. Dinky did almost drop in the lane there, but was able to get out safely.
I really like how Salty Potatoes are attempting to put the pressure onto G2. But this Grace pick in the early game provides so much damage for the side of G2, really augments the poor early game that CP Idris has. Kiana Nakoa is kind of the reason that Hundor's so safe and so dominant in the lane so far.
Yeah, exactly, and you know, Dark Potato as well, maybe not the strongest early game, definitely can fare well in the early game as we saw, but will become a much bigger threat as the game goes on. It will be interesting to see what route Dark Potato decides to go on this Krull. He could go with that Tension Bow Poison Shiv build that we've seen so popular on so many people, or he could just go into a very tanky, protect the Hundor kind of playstyle, which we know G2 so well for. And so far the farm is pretty even. We have about 1,000 gold advantage on the side of G2, and that is Dark Potato is pretty sizably ahead in the jungle, and Hundor a little bit ahead in the lane. Not anything major, nothing that Sneaky Potatoes can't come back from, but definitely a huge advantage for G2 to take a late game composition and be ahead early.
Oh, for sure. They are just over 1,000 gold ahead, which doesn't sound like much. It is huge for a late game composition to be ahead. And it's not to say that Salty Potatoes have this early game composition that they're meant to win with. Their game is going to be pretty good in late. CP Black Feather, Weapon Power Kestrel, lots of power there, but they just haven't quite found the damage yet. And this puts G2 in a really a strong position, and Salty Potatoes in a compromising one. We see Shadow Glass now for Hundor here. He has so much damage available to him from Hell's Heart. waiting to be used by Dark Potato as he lurks in the shadows. Have to see where they strike. Esquire gonna move on in, trying to escape. It's a stun onto Cracks, not the main target. That should save Salty Potatoes here as Esquire looks to continue the poke. The fountain is not there for Cracks. Worth noting, he has so much gold but hasn't been back to shop. And he is looking to backport now.
Yeah, and if that gold's in your pocket, it's not going to help you in the next team fight. But as we get closer to level 8 for this Black Feather, he'll obviously get that additional range on those on points as well as additional damage. And that is absolutely huge for what a Crystal Black Feather needs to succeed in a fight. Might go too far, though.
Yeah, it's very deep. Fountain will be forced. Sneaky going to take poke damage as well. G2 have split here. This should be good for Salty Potatoes. Kianakoa is going to run. Dark Potato wasn't able to charge up his passive, so it's going to be an escape here. And maybe we should talk about this roster for Salty Potatoes as Cracks is going to be engaged upon by G2, but I'm not sure they're going to continue on. Maybe they do. Holy Nova, there's that Chakram. Sneaky almost dead. Cracks almost dead as well, but they can't quite find the kills. It's just going to be everyone escaping by the hairs on their chin. This Salty Potatoes roster, it's something that we haven't seen yet. Esquire and Cracks stepping in for the Joker and Clast. It is not the main Salty Potatoes roster, but after their week 1 loss, Sneaky didn't feel like Joker and Clast were quite holding their weight, so he's decided to switch things up here and see if Esquire and Cracks can make up for I guess the level of play that Sneaky didn't think that his other teammates were currently competing at.
Well, so far I'm going to have to say with first turret going to G2, that might not be looking like that was the case, but we'll have to see as the rest of the series goes on. Obviously, they have made it to day 2, so they are a little bit farther this time around, but, you know, that's, G2 has really come into their own. They've really become one of those teams that everybody in the league has to really consider when going into these games. You know, last season, G2 just barely avoided dropping in the challenge battles. And, you know, now, looking at them at this point, it's like, how were they ever in that position?
I have to agree with you there, because we know that G2 was a formidable team. They were the spring champions. 3rd place to 6th place, not really where you want to be. But there were excuses, some fairly genuine excuses, and I think the fact that G2 have come into the autumn season fairly strong, fairly committed to the game, and have been performing well since, I guess, regular player in the Vainglory 8. It shows that their excuses are valid. This is a team that you have to fear in Europe.
Yeah, and Dark Potato and Hundor. Oh, Hundor on point, really chunking him out there, Dowsy.
Should be okay for now, but one Divine Intervention was used to heal him up, and actually, looking at Dark Potato's health as well, Salty Potatoes in a position where they can continue that upgraded on point, level 8, extra range, and Esquire is abusing it currently. Hundo going to take some poke. Cracks goes on in. This is Kianakoa going low. Will we pop the fountain is the question. Pops his healing flask, re-engages as well. Cracks almost losing his life, but holding onto the fountain. Dark Potato is going to try and threaten here. Looks like Salty Potato is going to leave the fight.
Yeah, Salty Potatoes, was doing a good job with the poke there. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find a kill, and as a result, they weren't really able to get anything as far as objective damage down either. Obviously, the gold mine is now full, so both teams are going to have to start considering that as Kianakoa pops some vision off of the side of Sneaky Potatoes here. Blackfeather not quite going to be able to get the damage down here to follow up on anything, but so far we have, a small lead still for Dark Potato in the jungle, as well as having that first blood. He has that tension bow complete, as well as he's gone with the Aegis to prevent some of that poke damage that Esquire is going to be able to put out on this Blackfeather. Obviously going that Shatterglass first does provide a raw burst of damage when you land those on points, but will be negated a bit by the Aegis, as it is now G2 starting up the gold mine. Will Salty Potatoes find their way down here in time? It does not look like they're going to.
Oh, it just goes so quickly. When Hundor moves into melee range, he gets bonus weapon power damage instead of just the crystal power damage that his auto attacks receive due to the Divergent Paths heroic perk that Idris has, with a crew there as well. Very, very quick objectives here for G2. So what you're going to have to consider is that they could take a turret, they could take a Kraken, very, very quickly. Salty Potatoes can't really allow them to rotate into that position.
Yeah, we do have an infusion right now on Hundor. Level 8 infusion popped. Dark Potato has a level 9 infusion in pocket. But Sneaky and Esquire also have infusions in their pockets. This next fight, if it does break out, will really determine who's going to get their gold value out of those infusions. If you lose out on a team fight and you infused for it, then that infusion essentially goes to waste.
Ooh, lots of damage. That's going to be a one-shot connecting Divine Intervention. Should heal Hundor up to just 3/4 of his HP. Hundor looking like he popped the healing flask as well, so not going to have that up for the next fight either. Esquire is really doing a lot of work here. This artillery composition from Salty Potatoes has a lot of threat if G2 can't hard engage. G2 needs a hard engage, get that cruel Grace onto the front line. Idris, the broken myth needs to be purchased. There it is. There's the engage. Oh, it's beautiful. 3-man holding over. In fact, Esquire able to get out of it, but it's 1 kill already to Dark Potato. 2, as that's the second going over. There's a stun. Krax looking like he shall fall. Dark Potato wants 3, but Krax isn't going to give it up as easily here. He should be able to escape by the looks of it as well, unless he missteps, which he hasn't. G2 with 2, now looking to steal away jungle.
Yeah, and taking away that jungle from this Blackfeather is absolutely key because it's so hard to come back in a game from a Crystal Blackfeather play. As a second turret now goes over to G2. There's a pretty sizable gold lead that has been developed for them. We're almost 12 minutes into this game, sitting at roughly 4,000 gold lead, working on 4,500. And so far, you know, just the build progression on everybody on G2 is really showing it. It is Hundor working into his third offensive item. Sneaky is as well, but Esquire working into his second offensive item. And Dark Potato already has 2 tier 3 offenses and a tier 3 defense complete, as well as working into that armor, which is going to help him survive that front line against Sneaky. Kiana Nakoa also going into that metal jacket very early on. Going to make it very difficult for Sneaky to get the damage that he needs down.
Yeah, it's worth noting now that Hundor has this broken myth, Salty Potatoes have to be very scared of this Idris. The fact that Hundor doesn't have a reflex block shows how little he cares about this supposed Catherine counter pick. Merciless Pursuit, not even phasing him at this point of the game. G2, their weakness is poke. If they get out-poked to a point where Kiana Nakoa can't heal them, then that is kind of Salty Potatoes' win condition. In fact, I think their poke needs to be onto Kiana Nakoa, force out a Divine Intervention onto the Grace itself, and that will put G2 in a slightly worse position before a team fight starts.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, you know, you mentioned it, now that Hundor has that broken myth online, this Idris really is going to start to take off in these fights, especially if Krax stays too forward a little too long. If Krax allows Hundor to build up any broken myth stacks before a fight begins, it is going to be a matter of Hundor hitting Sneaky with a Chakram and pretty much dropping him dangerously low immediately in a fight. And then Dark Potato is going to be able to come in with that Tension Bow proc and make short work of this squishy Kestrel. So we'll have to see if Krax can use the Merciless Pursuit and the Blast Tremor properly in these fights to make sure Kiana Nakoa is not able to heal his teammates with that Divine Intervention, as he is now working into an Echo, and Krax is nowhere near an Echo of his own. So Kiana Nakoa getting ready to hit a massive power spike here on Grace. 2 points into Divine Intervention. It's going to increase the healing. And when that Echo comes out, it's going to be crazy.
Ooh. Dark Potato gets immediately stunned up here. At Caprin may not be threatening the Idris, but definitely is threatening this Cruel, and a late reflex means that he gets stunned up and almost deleted. Kiana Nakoa didn't use anything to heal him. That is trust, I think, at that point, that Dark Potato is going to escape.
Yeah, absolutely. It had to be good communication coming out of them, because I thought for sure Dark Potato was going to die, but no Divine Intervention used, no Fountain, no Crucible, absolutely nothing. And that's going to keep it a 3-0 lead right now for the side of G2. And we do see that Grace and Kroll have to go in together. Here we go.
It's going to be a stun coming out, but Sneaky has to escape. They're going to turn onto Krax, taking a lot of damage. Oh, the Chakram on the backline. Sneaky almost does get deleted from the map. Like you mentioned, has to be careful. G2, they have 5 seconds to take this gold miner. I think they've realized that the clock is just too little, and they are going to allow it to be swallowed up by the Kraken. She's onto the fold. An Aegis and an Echo purchase for G2. This next team fight, Salty Potato is going to be at a deficit of power.
Absolutely, and as Kiana Nakoa is not letting up the aggression, Hundor is looking to come in here and build stacks, Dowsy.
He is. He's up to 4. A stun onto Kiana Nakoa. The poke is there, but Hundor also building up his own broken myth. Kiana Nakoa very happy to heal up using Life Spring, the passive on the fountain. And G2, they're threatening Salty Potatoes. By pushing in the lane, they said to Salty Potatoes, you have to come check the Kraken, or you have to at least fight for vision. G2 go to backport, get their infusions online, clear out the backs as well. It's one thing that these teams are constantly thinking of, Denominate, is making sure that they're getting those jungle camps into their system so they keep up in experience, keep up in gold.
Yeah, absolutely, but one huge benefit G2 has at this point is Dark Potato on this Krull can essentially solo out a Kraken. So that could result in a situation where Kiana Nakoa and Hundor push the enemies back, make it difficult for them to come in and make an engagement. And the whole time, Dark Potato can sit there and just work on that Kraken. So that is a huge thing to make note of here going forward. Esquire and Sneaky, obviously, if they're able to get in here onto Hundor, who's playing very far forward, could find a lot of damage. But it is just going to be G2 backing off. Aegis now complete for Hundor as well as Dark Potato. And overall, just G2 is so far ahead at this point, and now as Hundor is working into his Frostburn, he is going to be a very scary threat to deal with, especially with no shielding here on Sneaky.
This is the thing. May talk about it in a second. Kiana Nakoa caught out. Hell's Heart blocked up. Looks like the fight is going to break out. Blast Tremor also blocked, but the one-shot comes through and Kiana Nakoa gets sniped. Hundor now has to find the damage as Dark Potato is going to be his front line. Cracks surviving. Hundor by himself, but he has so many broken myth stacks. He can win this 1v3. He's looking for it. Sneaky though in Fizz. Chakram will hit. He finds the kill, but the ace comes through. They trade. Salty Potatoes get 3 on the board and Cracks last man standing.
All right, as we get into that replay, we see Kiana Nakoa dropped dangerously low, and as they run away, Silence gets blocked, but Sneaky finds a one-shot, one-kill. All the time, though, Hundor is sitting here building up broken myth stacks. It is Dark Potato that drops next, but 300, 400 damage coming out of Hundor is enough to drop the Black Feather. One final chakram before his life is taken. He finds a kill onto Sneaky as well. And Cracks, being a lone Catherine, not going to be able to really do anything off the back of that. Not strong enough to take a sentry, not strong enough to take a turret, and not strong enough to take a Kraken either. So overall,
he did get one turret for himself, which is
yeah, the minion wave took the turret, but the next turret he wasn't able to get. And obviously, you know, Catherine not going to be able to solo out that Kraken, no Storm Guard. So overall, not a huge loss for G2, considering Hundor was able to find 2.
No, agreed. Absolutely agreed. The goal does get a little bit slimmer, at least the lead, but it's not really going to hurt G2's chances. G2 are the kings, as I wanted to say before that fight broke out, of the late game. They are the European late game gods. However boring you may feel that playstyle is, you have to respect that G2 are the best when it comes to it. And every team that goes up against G2 knows this. They know that if G2 are going to draft a late game composition, then they have to win the early game. The pressure is on Salty Potatoes to win that early game. They did not. Now G2 in a great position to win this game. Kraken, very low. Kiana Nakoa blocking up that Blast Tremor. This Kraken's going to be contested here. Salty Potatoes have to be careful though, because Hundor has broken myth stacks, and Sneaky is very low on the back line. Great Crucible comes through to block up Hundor, just dancing around, but no Chakram to follow through. Doesn't matter, finds a kill onto Sneaky. Cracks will fall very shortly, and this Kraken is one auto attack. In fact, it's taken. Didn't even see it get taken. Easy fight for G2, and almost over, I think, for Salty Potatoes.
Yeah, it's definitely not looking good for them. This Idris is going to make short work of the turret while the Kraken is there, soaking up a majority of the damage. And with 20-second death timers on Sneaky and Cracks, there's not going to be much that Esquire can do. G2, Kraken's not even here. Turret is dropping so quickly, Dousty. they're able to find a kill or two here, they could just end the game, but they have to be careful. We see teams all too often overstay on a Kraken push and give a huge advantage to the enemy.
Yeah, Hundor's looking to take this turret down, but he has taken a lot of poke. Divine Invention's ready to go. Hundor very low as well. Kianakoa dies before he gets to use anything. The fountain wasn't actually up and ready, and that's going to be Hundor losing his life. Oh, you called it, Denominate. G2 with a massive overextension.
Yeah, stayed out way too far. Keanu Nakoa didn't have Fountain available, as well as you mentioned, died before he was able to use the Divine Intervention on either himself or Hundor. And then as Hundor gets cut off, he does look for one kill, not quite able to find it. And just like that, Salty Potatoes picks up some bounties for themselves. And Sneaky now a 4 offensive item Kestrel. Blackfeather does have the Broken Myth Shatterglass and a additional Piercing Shard in pocket. So those on points are going to start to hurt quite thoroughly. But, you know, again, this turret, very, very easy, at least, for G2 to take that down. Crystal Idris so good into the objectives, and that turret being below half health is not looking good for the side of Salty Potatoes here. This one, unless if a miracle fight happens where Hundor gets caught out way too in the front line, I don't know if I believe in the Salty Potato hype wagon.
Keanu Nakoa taking a lot of damage. Dark Potato, though, he is so tanky and has that Divine Intervention. Oh, Sneaky steps into a Chakram. This is not good. Esquire is dead. Cracks frontlining. Stormguard Bubble not really doing anything for him to save his life. And G2 instantly going to turn and look to push into the base. 40 seconds on Esquire's death timer means that they have a chance to end it all here now, Denominate.
Yeah, they have a chance to. They do have to be careful. Dark Potato is going to heal himself up a little bit, but Keanu Nakoa is still pretty low, and with the Bone Saw on Sneaky, if he's able to get a couple Glimmer Shots down, they could really ramp up the damage. And actually, G2 knows the threat that Sneaky can provide on this hero. They just turn their attention to the jungle, take down a Crystal Sentry, and then look to go and get some shopping done. 12 seconds left on Esquire. He will have enough in his pocket to re-infuse, as well as Sneaky has gold in his pocket to re-infuse, but we really need to see a Echo come out of cracks and get a good silence down. Kraken now on the board, and G2 wasting no time at all. Going to go ahead and start that one up. If Salty Potatoes can get a steal here and get the health regeneration from the Kraken, definitely see something happening.
Fight's gonna break out. Keanu Nakoa does get stunned up. Hundor uses his ultimate to reposition into the fight instantly. He's not gonna have that to escape. And look at the damage onto Dark Potato. He's dead. Salty Potatoes turning this fight. Keanu Nakoa not tanky enough. He's gonna go down to the one shot. Maybe it will be Esquire diving on in. There is so many mistakes coming out of G2 here. Salty Potatoes did literally nothing special in that fight. G2 are just over aggressive.
Yeah, they absolutely were, and like you mentioned, Hundor used the Shimmer Strike to try to get into a better position, and unfortunately, it left him in a very vulnerable situation. As a Crystal Idris, your movement is your real source of defense, and then as Dark Potato gets blown up on that front line, the Bonesaw stacks building up from Sneaky on this Kestrel. They were able to take him down, and now that is a Kraken for Salty Potatoes. So the miracle fight wasn't getting Hundor down when he was out of position. It was Hundor being out of position that actually got Dark Potato killed.
Right.
And from there, they were able to take the rest of the fight. They get a Kraken. Echo is now complete for Catherine, and this is really the best chance at this point that the side of Salty Potatoes has to take an actual 3v3 fight and could potentially still win this game.
Keanu Nakoa is the key to this composition. He needs to be finding the correct engagements and not losing his life before his frontline can even join him. Turret has already fallen. Salty Potatoes, they're in a solid position at the moment, but they can't really push any further. So it is just going to be the Kraken left to die as it walks towards the Vein Crystal turret. Salty Potatoes to take away the Crystal Sentry and the rest of the jungle as well. And G2, this is their game to lose at this point, Denominate. If they continue not respecting Salty Potatoes, overextending Hundor, and overextending Keanu Nakoa, then it's an easy game to lose.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think both of these teams really have to respect each other and the damage that they can put out. It's been looking so good for G2, but when G2 doesn't respect the damage that Sneaky is able to put out, respect the utility that Krax brings to the table, it oftentimes results in G2 making mistakes positionally and then ends up costing them the fight. Dark Potato is looking to work into a Crucible now to try to help out with the double silence coming out of Catherine. But, you know, again, Sneaky has been such a huge threat in these past couple fights, blowing up Dark Potato, building up a couple Bonesaw stacks, and then the Glimmer Shots raining in have just made short work of that Krull on the front line. Here we go.
Good stun. Dark Potato doesn't block it up. Now it is going to be the fight breaking out. Hundle trying to get into position. Throws the Chakram this time. Now he Shiver Strikes. That's how you do it. And that will be Sneaky going down. It's Esquire falling very quickly. Easy fight for G2. It seems like Hundle's realized his mistakes, not using his ultimate for combos. And Krax, well, he can't do anything here. He will fall very quickly. An ace comes through for G2. They figure out the pieces of the puzzle. Now it's time to deal with that last remaining Vein Crystal turret.
Absolutely, and I do want to make note that Hundor did go the Eve of Harvest for his 4th item. We didn't touch on it, but it did give him the additional survivability in those past couple fights. And just like that, G2 proving that they are a team to be reckoned. And we will be getting into a game number 2 here very shortly, and hopefully, you know, I think if you are the side of Salty Potatoes, you have to consider that G2 runs those late game compositions. You need to pick something that can really handle that CP Idris in the late game if you're going to allow it to go through.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you don't have the stronger late game composition, then get the stronger early game and finish it out. Salty Potatoes continuing to fall to G2. It's 1-0 in the series.